One of the stories that Dad used to, and this was from his personal experience, that he was building a fence one time uh, down around the spring, and he noticed a beagle looking dog coming toward him from off in the distance. And he said the closer the dog got, he noticed that something wasn't quite right with it. And it was coming on a straight line toward him down the fence road. And he just quit what he was doing and started watching that dog. And it come closer and closer, and it looked up at him. And he said, well, dogs usually don't do that. Especially if they don't know you, they'll just, ignore you and go on. Well, he said this thing had human hands instead of feet. And he knew then that it was a staholo, and that was a shapeshifter. And he said he just more or less was stunned, and he just stood watching it. He watched it walk off, and it just kept going down the fence line until it just walked out of sight. And another time, Dad was in town, and this was back when they had benches in front of these old stores, and a bunch of these old men would spit and whittle and just kill the time of day. And there was a stranger. All these men noticed there was a stranger, and he had a black duster on and a big brimmed hat, and he was just walking down the sidewalk toward all of these guys, and he walked up there, and they all just was watching him, and he lifted his head up a little bit, and he had the face of an owl, and that really got their attention, but they was too shocked to do anything. And they said it was like he had hands, but it was like he was flapping his wings under that duster and stuff, and they said they stood there and did nobody do nothing. They was just shocked. And he walked on down around the building, and when they decided to untrack and go see what was happening, he was gone, and there was several different things like that had happened. Another time Dad was, I think he was plowing a garden at that time, and it was a little ways from the house, but he noticed something out of the corner of his eyes, and it was in the tree. And when he looked, he said he could see a figure, and it was standing on a branch, and it was just watching him. He said, but he could see through it, and it was kind of like it was glimmering and shining, and it didn't move, and he didn't move for a long time. Finally, he decided, I might ought to get out of here, so he backed away a little bit and took off, and he'd look back, and it would still be in that branch, shimmering. And he watched it for a long time, and finally, when he looked back, it was gone. So, that's, he didn't really know if that was a shillock, or, a ghost, or he didn't really have no explanations for it. And the strangest things that ever happened to me, I guess, one of the strangest, that was me and my best friend had went to the railroad tracks, and we was sitting alongside the hill, and we'd been putting pennies on the railroad and letting the train smash them. And there was coyotes back in those days, and so I had a little 22 single shot, and we'd been watching the trains. Went and picked up our smashed pennies, and we was heading back toward the house, and there was a barn in between us and the house, and we had just put up a brand new 5-strand barbed wire fence. And we heard what we thought was my sister talking in the barn. And there was a black dog that had followed us home. We didn't know who he was. We all like dogs, so we let him stay. And uh, we heard my sister thought it was her saying, "Man, that's a good-looking black dog." And what in the world is she doing in a barn at this time of night? And we took a step. We decided we was going to scare her. And we took a step. We started sneaking in, and we was creeping up through there, and we heard a man's voice. That stopped us. Slim looked at me, and I looked at Slim. Who in the world is this? Well, let's scare both of them. So Slim come up with the idea, I'll go sneak around this side of the barn. You go to the south side, and we'll meet at the doorway. And when we get there, we'll jump out and holler at them. Well, Slim had a flashlight, and I had a .22. So we crept around there being real quiet, and we got to the door and nodded at each other, and we jumped in the barn. My sister wasn't there, no man was there, but that dog was sitting there looking at us. He was grinning at us, and his eyes was red, just glowing red. And Slim looked at me, and I looked at Slim, and we crossed trails. He went to that side of the barn, I went to that side of the barn. We ran to the back and both jumped that 5-strand barbed wire fence. Well, in the meantime, my sister thought we was at Slim's house, so she had locked up all the doors. And she was up, and I think she was doing dishes, and we hit that back screen door, and it was locked, couldn't get in. And we was banging and hollering and trying to get in, and well, she come to the back door to let us in, but by then we was on the front door. And we started beating on that door trying to get in. Well, she come through the house to open up the front door. We was in the back again. And so she finally got us in there, and we just fell into the back, the kitchen there. And she said, "What in the?" She's asking, and we asked her, said, "Was you just out in the barn?" She said, "Are you crazy? I ain't going out in that dark thing." And we said, "Well, that dog was talking to somebody." She didn't believe us. And the next morning when we went out, the dog was gone. And we was riding horses through Kyoto down by the granary, and that dog all of a sudden appeared. And Slim told me, he said, "There's your dog." Now, he ain't my dog. Well, we watched. He followed us. His eyes wasn't red no more, and he was acting like a normal dog. And there was a truck come over the hill, and that dog crossed the road at the time that truck come over, and it hit him, and it just mangled that dog. And he was in the ditch, and I was thinking, thank you, Lord, get rid of this thing. And Slim said, "You won't have to worry about your dog no more." Well, when we made our trip and come back, the dog wasn't in a ditch. And Slim said, "He must not have been as mangled as what we thought." Well, we got back to the house. The dog was in the barn again, completely well, pulled back together, and he's sitting there looking at us. His eyes wasn't red, but he was grinning at us. And Slim said, "There ain't something right with your dog." I said, "He ain't my dog." I said, "You can have him if you want him." Well, later on that week, some of my buddies wanted us to go hunting with them. And I thought we was going to hunt rabbits or squirrels or something. And they had intentions of hunting duck or deer or whatever we ran across. They brought big rifles, 30-06s and 30-30s. And there we was with a .22, And we was just starting up the foot of what they call Willis Mountain. And they said, "There goes something through those bushes." And we all stopped and looked, and it was that stupid dog. And we'd left him at the barn. He was running across there, and they said, "Whose dog is that?" And I said, Slim said, "Get him!" And they all opened fire. And we seen that dog get rolled. I don't know how many times they hit him, but we seen that dog, and we went over, and he was deader than yesterday's leaf. He was dead. No pulse. He wasn't even bleeding on it. He was gone. And so, me and Slim, they said, "Oh, he's a goner." Me and Slim said, "Don't hold your breath." He's thinking he's going to be back at the barn before we are. And he never did show up after that. I don't know where he went. Maybe he went home with them old boys. I never did hear, but that was a dynamic dog. And the before they put the highway through in 1968, they had it all graded up. And Dad had just told us when he was a boy there used to be panthers running around in that part of the Oklahoma. And after he spooked us up, me and Slim went to town, and it was late that night, about probably 9 or 10 o'clock. We should have been home before dark, but we got to loafing around and come from Slim's house, and he was going to stay all night. And I had a dog named Stormy. He was probably about a 25-pound dog, and he was short, real long hair. Didn't know where he come from. He just showed up. And we was crossing that road, and Slim said, "Here comes Stormy." And it looked like Stormy. And it got closer and closer, and we noticed, well, Stormy ain't near this long. That thing was about 10 foot long. It was covered with hair, and it come up to Slim and laid its head on his shin down here and looked up at him, and it had alligator teeth and red glowing eyes. And just before that, Slim had heard something, so we picked up a rock. We both picked up a rock, and it grabbed Slim's leg, and like it had hands, and it was hugging him, and it was looking straight up in his face. And Slim looked down, and he hollered. And I'm still trying to think, what could be this long, you know? And Slim hollered, or screamed actually, and he throwed his rock, and he completely missed his leg and it too. And he said it won't let go. So I had my rock, I threw it, and I hit it right in the head. And I mean, it started making the awfulest noise, the awfulest sound, guttural sounds, and for a little small head, it was the big teeth. It was making roaring sounds, you know. But it let go of Slim and started just tying itself in knots like a snake. And my nephew, I forgot about him, but he was with us, and he was just a little guy. And so one of us hollered, "Run!" Well, Steve took off running. Well, we let him have about 3 steps, and we took off. And that thing was trying to uncoil itself, and we didn't know what it was going to grab next. So we took off, and Slim was on one side of Steve, I was on the other. We just each grabbed an arm, and we took off. He was running too, but he was about that high off the ground, just getting it, you know. We ran up the hill, and we topped up the hill, and we could still hear it growling and carrying on and stuff, but we couldn't see it anymore. So we ran on to the house and, you know, locked the door and told everybody we just had an experience of some kind. And Dad said, "Yeah, it's a shillow," you know. And we'd found out later that there was an old Indian cemetery at the bottom part of our pasture that I guess they thought got deconsecrated or something, or disturbed or something. But every once in a while, Dad said something like that would show up, you know. So, and another thing we had talking about the shapeshifters. This only happened to me one time, and that was enough. Mom and Dad had gone to a singing at some Baptist church, and I guess Dave was on a date or something. Anyway, I was at the house by myself, and I never made that mistake. But I was getting a little older, and I thought, well, you know, I can handle it. So I was there by myself, and I don't think I was a teenager yet. But back in the old house, people would come up, different people, and Dad wouldn't let us kids around them. And he would tell us they're stahulos, or they got bad spirits, or they deal in spirits, or witch doctors, or medicine men's, what we called them. And he said, we will not, I don't want you kids by them, you know, because they take children sometimes. And so at night, I remember supposed to be asleep, but I'd be looking out the window, and we had an old bench made out of a rock, and there was an oak tree on the far side of the yard. And Dad would offer them, he didn't smoke, but he always kept tobacco. And when they would show up, he'd give them a cigar or uh, roll your own cigarettes or a chaw of tobacco or something, and that's to, I guess, kind of appease their spirits, you know. And I remember seeing the glow of their cigars and stuff, sitting there in the bedroom watching them, and they would stay. Sometimes he'd talk all night, but Dad would stay with them to keep them talking. And when it got toward daylight, I'd fall asleep or something. But when I'd wake up, they'd be gone, you know. And Dad would come in, and he wouldn't ever tell us what went on or what they talked about or anything. But he told us, you ain't getting around them. Anyway, Dad and Mom was gone. They hadn't laid the tracks to the railroad yet or put the highway through. And we'd always had a lot of dogs, and Dad, I guess that's why I still have little dogs, but that was part of our culture, that Dad had taught us a little dog can see a spirit, and if they walk toward them, a big dog will follow, and the spirit will go. Well, I had surrounded myself with dogs, little ones and big ones, and I had walked down to the lower end of our pasture where the old house stood, and I was just goofing around, kind of at that shell pit, Well, I was walking back down this railroad bed, and it hadn't had the rails laid on it or the ties laid down, just the gravel, the bed. And my dogs, they was all with me. Well, some of them was. The main ones, they didn't, I don't know why they stayed at the house, the stupid things. They should have went with me. But I walked up and I seen this guy in a corner of our pasture, and there was some woods there where the old hog pen used to be, and it had all grown up, and the bushes had got big, and there was a guy and a little fire there. And I think, he shouldn't be here, And when he raised up, I knew, because I'd seen that face from as a kid, when him coming to and visit with Dad at night. And I could tell you his name now, but I'm not sure he's dead yet. But he raised up and kind of looked over his shoulders, and I said, hi, I called him his name. And he said, hello. And when he raised up, he had his bottom part was an animal, and his top part was a man. And when he raised up, he started walking toward me. Well, I jumped the fence. And the dogs I had with me, they didn't know they're supposed to protect me. They ran with me. And he come up and he jumped the fence. And we went down that railroad bed, and we'd crossed a culvert, and they just put it in, fresh tarred it in. And I went across it, and I jumped the last fence, and I looked back, and he was still coming. And my dogs that was staying at the house, they seen him apparently, and they just went by me like the cavalry. I was never so glad to see anything like that in my life. Man, they was full cry. They was full-throated, ready to fight, Well, when I looked back again, I guess he had gone through that culvert, because that's where all the dogs went. And even the little ones turned around, and they went back then, And I went to the house, and I got my gun, and I was afraid to go in the house, so I sat on the porch with that gun and had all them dogs around me, and they didn't settle down for quite a while. But it was about 12 o'clock, Mom and Dad come rolling in, and I told them what had happened, and they said, they asked me who it was, and I told them, and Dad said, that's one of the ones I told you not to be messing with. And I said, I know, Dad. I've learned my lesson, But anyway, 2 or 3 days, I took my gun and all my dogs back through there, and I went and looked around to see what sign I could find. And the fire was still, it was burnt out, but it was still there. And I looked under that culvert, and there was a hoof print that's I guess still there today. I went and I told CJ about it, and he said, let's go look, but it's kind of underwater and we can't. But even after I was married, I went back and looked, and there was a hoof print of a calf in that culvert, in that tar. I'm thinking, I got proof, but I can't prove nothing actually, but that happened. My sister that had passed away, and Slim, this is before Bigfoot even become a thing, you know. Some of my buddies told me that they was going to go swimming and spend the night at a strip pit. Well, me and Slim cooked up the idea, and my sister heard us talking about it. We was going to go down there and spook them. And they had a big bonfire, and they was cooking, and I think probably even had a keg of beer. So I don't know what all they had, but we was on one side of the bank. Well, my sister wanted in on the deal. She drove us down there. And we parked the car about a mile away from the strip pit so they wouldn't hear us coming, you know. We got out and we was sneaking, walked down the fence, walked down the road, crossed the fence, crawled up one side of this, and I mean that shell pit was straight up.
Pause. For people who might live in Washington, D.C. and have no idea what a strip pit is, explain what that is.
A strip pit is a place where they dug rocks or shell out to build a road bed, and they left the holes there, and the water that seeped through the ground over years would fill them up. And aquifers, I guess, if it busted them, you know, it'd help fill them up. Anyway, they left the shell heels on the east side, and it was flat on the west and north side, or west side and south side. And we crawled up on the east side, straight up this hill, and the shell would go to sliding under our feet, and we'd pull our way up by roots and saplings and stuff. Finally, we made it to the top, and we started finding rocks. We made little piles of rocks. My sister said, "I'm going to stop right here and throw my rocks." And the plan was, when we all three got set up, one of us would throw the rock, and that would be the signal. And it'd sound just like somebody big swimming out in the middle of that strip pit. And they was all having a good time. Somebody brought a boom box or something, and music was going, and one of us throwed a rock, and another one throwed a rock, and the third one throwed it, and it sounded just like somebody swimming and kicking. Well, that got their attention. They said, "What?" We heard them, "What is that? Turn that music off," you know. And when they did that, we quit throwing the rocks. And they listened for a while, and it wasn't us, so they went back, and we started throwing rocks again. Well, they got the bright idea that they was going to put somebody along the edge, and the others go turn up the rocks and see what was going on. Well, they did, and we threw the rocks, and after a while they caught on. It's somebody, you know, on the other side. Who is that? Well, about that time, Slim was the first. I was in the middle, and Reem was the furthest down. She come running by me, and she said, "Something just grabbed my hand." And I said, "What was it?" She said, "I don't know, but I seen the outline of it. It was big, and it had long hair, and it stunk." She said, "It grabbed my hand and wouldn't let go." And she said, "I got away, you know." She grabbed me, so I took off running. I mean, she explained as we was running. And we ran by Slim, and he said, "What's that?" He's gathering rocks again. He said, "What's that?" And I said, "Come on, let's go." And I grabbed him by the arm. Well, when me and him had run together long enough, when one of us had split, the afterburners come on, you know, and the jets, we was gone. Well, we just dove off that steep cliff that we had spent so much time trying to get up, and that barbed wire fence was right below it. We knew we was going to slide right through it if we didn't jump. So all three of us bailed over the top. Pants legs got tore up, hands got tore up, and we could hear whatever it was crashing through the brush right behind us. And we hit the road, and we took off running. And we heard the barbed wire just screech like it's something big had hit it, like a bull had hit it. And we took off, and like I say, we parked about a mile from the car, and we just ran our hearts out and once we got there, of course, we dropped the keys. We was all trying to get in, and Reem pulled the keys out. Well, me and Slim grabbed them, slapped them out of our hands, grabbed them, trying to get in. And Slim happened to look down the road. He said, I can't use the words he said, but he said, "Here it comes." And we looked down, we all looked up, and right in the middle of the road we could see a black silhouette that looked like a giant coming down that road. Well, we finally got in the car and she pulled it into reverse. We backed out and we kept going east because it was coming from the west, you know. And so we made the block, and she said, well, let's go see what that was. So we made a 4-mile block there. Come back, couldn't even find nothing there, you know. The guys, apparently they'd seen something too, because there wasn't nobody left at the strip pits, you know. And nobody talked about that for a long time. It kind of shook us up. But that was the first, I guess, dealings. I don't know if it's Sasquatch or what, but the second time that happened, I was about 14 or 15 years old, up on Three Sticks, the mountains up there. And my brother, he had a bright idea that we was going to go spend the week up there. And so he took me and Slim. It might have been Slim drawing all these things in, I don't know. But he took us up there, and he had a few supplies, and we had a pump tent, and he left us our guns and our sleeping bags. Not very many groceries, because he said, I'll be right back. 3 days later, he showed up. We had done gone through all of our supplies, and we woke up at third morning, starved to death. And we knew we was going to die on that mountain. We was starved to death. Well, Slim, he could hear better than I could see better than him then, but he could hear better than I could. He said, I hear a beagle dog. Well, back then, you could hunt deers with beagles. So we thought, we'll get in front of that beagle and shoot us a deer and we'll be all right. The only thing was, it was on that mountain. So we had to fight our way up that mountain. We was starved to death. We was weak. We was starved to death. And we started going toward that deer dog, and was trying to get in front of the deer. And he started running towards us. So we got all set. We just knew we was going to get a deer. And man, we was primed and ready, mouth was watering. And we could hear it coming through the leaves, but there was some brush between us and it. And we got all ready, and man, all of a sudden this big old rabbit come out. Well, that was good enough. We both shot. We emptied our guns at that rabbit and didn't hit it nowhere near. And that beagle said, Slim, when that beagle was still following it, Slim said, let's get the dog. So we're trying to hit the dogs with the guns. You know, we're just going to cook the dog. He dodged us, went on down chasing that rabbit. And we thought, man, we don't have strength enough to make it back down to camp through all those creeks we just crossed. And Slim said, I hear a rooster. I knew he was delirious. I said, there ain't no roosters out in these woods. He said, listen. So we staggered up a few more feet up that mountain. Sure enough, we heard a rooster. And Slim, I said, we ain't got a gun. He said, we'll steal it. We'll kill it. We'll worry about things later. We're going to steal that rooster. Sound like a good idea to me. I was starving. So we made it plumb to the top of that mountain, and we looked down to the north, and there was a filling station. And this was the Walton's filling station. I mean, it was an old-time gas pumps. And we knew it was an operation because there was no beat-up truck. Pulled in, got gas, walked in the store, bought some groceries, and left. So me and Slim started to put together, we ain't got no money. The first thought was, let's rob the place. But, you know, no, we might not. How much change or how much money you got? And, you know, I knew I didn't have much, and I was digging around and looking through everything, trying to find. And we come up, I might have been 75 cents or $1 worth of change, pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. Well, we staggered back off of this mountain, and you know you look pretty rough when you come off of a mountain anyway. And we had branches and leaves in our hair and on our clothes, mud. We was wet from crossing them creeks, and we walked in, staggered in there, and I guess that old man, the proprietor, he must have been used to seeing people like that, because he didn't even bat an eye. And he asked us, "Can I help you boys?" And we said, "Yeah, what can we buy with this much change?" We counted it out, and he said, "Well, there's some penny candy there, and some Slim Jims there, and I think he donated a soda to us. He must have felt sorry. Well, anyway, we wound up with a soda too, and I think 1 can of Vienna sausage. So we split everything we had and drank the soda, and we knew we had to stagger back up that mountain, and we didn't get to steal the rooster. You know, I don't know where he disappeared to, but he knew what was coming, so he split. But we staggered back up that mountain, and Wayne finally showed up that night, and he brought some more groceries and a big pot of beans, and me and Slim was just wanting to duck our heads in that pot and just slurp it up. But Wayne said, well, let's go scout around. Me and Slim had done been scouting around and we knew that mountain. All the deers went to the other mountain. But anyway, Wayne told us, he said, "Here's some groceries." After we got back to camp, he said, "I'm going to go back after 2 of my nephews. He said, "And I'll be right back." He said, I'll be back in just a couple hours. I'll be back tonight." I didn't know my brother was such a liar. 3 days later, he showed up. You know, about the time for him to go back to work, he come picked us up. Well, that night, apparently 2 hunters had come by our camp and parked below our camp while we was going on our little adventure there, and they had made camp. Well, that night, Slim, he said, "What is that?" It was about 8 o'clock. It was good and dark. And he said, "I hear something. Who's that mumbling?" And, well, that got my attention. Who's mumbling on our mountain? And I didn't hear it for a long time, and he said, "Listen." So we was camped on a ledge of the mountain, and down below us, probably about 100 yards, was a creek. That's where we got our water. And Slim said, "Something is coming down beside us." And he said, "It's mumbling, but I can't make it out what it is." So we picked our guns up and walked over a little ways. And we'd done had a fire started for the night, a little bitty fire. But we'd had plenty of firewood to last us through the night. You know, from the tent, we could just throw more firewood on the fire and not get out of bed. And we both got to listening, and Slim was leaning into it. And he said, "It's getting closer." He said, "What is it he breaking?" And about then I started hearing something grumbling and growling and mumbling and stuff, and I never did hear no whistles or slaps or tree knocks or whatever. None of that stuff they say goes with Bigfoot, but we got to hearing trees sound like that's being broke. And it went right below our tent, and we really started hearing it. And so Slim and I had the same idea. We're going to build that far bigger. And man, we throwed every piece of wood we had on that, and we cut down some live pine trees, which, you know, you're never supposed to do, but we was cutting them down, throwing. We had a 100-foot fire going around our camp. But the thing is, we heard it below our camp, and it come from the east, and as far to the west as we could hear and listen to. We heard tree snaps and grumbling and moaning going on. And we stayed up all night and kept that fire going. And the next morning, bright and early, those 2 hunters that had come down that night and made camp, they come up and pulled in our camp, and they said, "Did you boys see that?" And we said, "No, what was it?" And they said, it come right by our camp, and he said, it was huge, and it was growling and kind of roaring at us, and we stayed up all night gardening, gardening ourselves, and I said, we did too. And they said, I don't know what it is, but we're getting out of here. And before we could say, wait for us, they was gone. Here we are in the middle of the woods, and it's a wonder that Wayne brought us more ammunition. And 3 days later, he showed up, and we was packed up, ready to go. And he said, well, these boys want to hunt a little bit. I said, let them. We're through. And the very next week, I wished I'd have saved that paper, but the Tallahena paper come out, and it said there was a huge hairy being sighted on 3 sticks. And so we went down that next morning after the sun got up, and after them old boys left, they said, you ought to seen the damage that thing done. They was telling us about the trees being, and it went right by their camp. And he said, go down and look at them trees that it did. And we thought, well, maybe it was them doing it, So we went down there, and those saplings, they was about that big around, and they was like 8 foot in the air, and they was just as straight as you, if you pulled a plumb line on it. And as far as you wanted to look, there were saplings, and they was all pointed the same way. I don't know what all that meant. Never seen it, heard of it, never even heard of nothing like that before, But that was my second deal, and I hope it's my last, because I can't outrun him now. I just had to stand there and fight, and that ain't going to turn out good. but that was my second dealings with something like that. And I try to tell people, if you hang around long enough, you're going to have an adventure.